Ellie and I were inseparable, the kind of twins people say share a soul. Growing up, we did everything together. We had our own language of glances and gestures, the kind of secret code only twins understand. We wore matching clothes, played the same games, and even had the same taste in books and movies. People would joke that we were like one person split into two bodies. I guess, in some strange way, that's how it felt to us too. Our house was a tall, old place with creaking floors and walls thick with memories. It was filled with nooks and corners we used as hideaways for games and whispered secrets. There was the attic where we'd play with boxes of forgotten things, and the long hallway lined with mirrors, where Ellie and I would dare each other to walk alone at night. We even shared a bedroom with twin beds just a few feet apart. Sometimes when the lights went out, we'd whisper to each other until we fell asleep, voices hushed but comforting in the dark. We shared everything, even our fears. And one of our biggest fears was the pool. When we were younger, our parents had taken us to swimming lessons, but Ellie struggled. She'd always been nervous around water, clinging to my hand whenever we'd go near the pool. I'd try to comfort her, insisting it was safe, that I'd never let her sink. I thought I was helping. But that day, the day it happened, we were alone at the pool at our house. I can't even remember why we were there, only that I was trying to help Ellie get over her fear. It was just the two of us, and the pool was eerily still. The water a perfect glossy mirror in the afternoon light. I remember helping her toward the deeper end, trying to get her to just dip her toes in, to see that it was fine. She hesitated, her hand clutching mine tightly, her eyes wide. "Come on, Ellie," I'd whispered, trying to be encouraging. "I won't let go. I promise." She took a small step forward, looking down into the water, her hand still gripping mine. But then somehow, we slipped. Maybe I lost my balance, maybe the ground was wet. Before I knew it, we both plunged in. I remember the feeling of cold water closing around us, that sickening panic as I reached out for her. Our hands just inches apart. Her eyes met mine under the water, wide with terror, her hand stretching toward mine, but we couldn't quite reach each other. The water churned as I struggled, my lungs burning. I tried to scream, but only bubbles escaped, rising to the surface. And then, everything went black. I woke up in the hospital, disoriented and aching, only to see Mom's face, pale and tear-streaked, leaning over me. When she told me Ellie hadn't made it, it felt like my heart shattered. I couldn't accept it. It was like part of me had been torn away, like I was left hollow, just half of who I was. The guilt consumed me slowly, and I spent hours replaying those last moments in my mind, wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have saved her. For months after that, I couldn't go near water. I even avoided the mirrors in our house. But as time passed, Ellie's presence in my mind grew stronger, like she was still close, just out of sight. I'd see little things that reminded me of her, hear faint echoes of her voice late at night. Then, one evening, I saw her. It started in the bathroom mirror. I was washing my face, looking down, when I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I looked up slowly, and there she was. Ellie, her face just behind mine in the glass, her eyes wide and sorrowful, staring back at me. Her hair hung wet and dark around her face, water dripping from her pale skin, her expression pleading, almost accusing. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe it was the guilt, the trauma. But she kept appearing, each time clearer, each time more real, as though she were stepping closer to me from some place far away. Her reflection would surface whenever I was near water. In the bathroom mirror when I was brushing my teeth, in the faint reflection on the windowpane during rainy nights, and once, chillingly, in the pool itself. The first time she spoke to me, I was brushing my hair in front of the vanity we used to share. I had absent-mindedly let my gaze drift, half expecting to see my own tired eyes staring back. But there was Ellie, her face almost touching mine in the glass, her pale lips moving soundlessly. I froze, heart pounding. Her lips shaped a word that I felt in my bones even if I couldn't hear it. My name. Sarah. I didn't answer at first. I couldn't. My breath caught in my throat and I stared, terrified but unable to look away. Her face was so familiar. Yet different. There was a chill to her skin, an unnatural stillness in her eyes, like she wasn't fully my sister anymore. But there was something else, too. A sadness, a pleading look that cut through my fear and rooted me to the spot. Finally, I whispered, "Ellie?" My voice shook, barely audible, as if I might break whatever fragile connection allowed her to be here in front of me. She didn't reply. Her expression softened, almost as if relieved, but still, she stayed silent. A moment later, her image flickered and faded, leaving me alone with my own wide-eyed reflection. I didn't sleep that night, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, pale and sad, hanging in the darkness. I was walking past the pool in our backyard one night, avoiding even looking at the water's surface, but something made me glance down. There she was, floating just beneath the surface, her eyes open and vacant, staring up at me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping, my heart hammering in my chest. When I dared to look again, she was gone. But the ripples on the water were real. As the days passed, Ellie's appearances grew more frequent, her form clearer, her face more desperate. She started appearing in every mirror in the house, but never when anyone else was around. Sometimes she'd be in the hallway mirror just behind me, her eyes following mine like she wanted to tell me something urgent. I tried talking to her, whispering her name over and over, asking her why she was there, what she wanted, if she was okay, but she never answered. She just stared, her mouth slightly open as if frozen in a silent scream. I tried everything I could think of to understand her message. I went to the places we used to play, combed through her things, hoping for a clue. I found old letters, worn photos, even her childhood diary, but there was nothing that explained why she was trapped in the mirrors, why she was reaching out to me. Days blurred together as I tried to unravel the mystery, my mind fraying at the edges from lack of sleep, haunted by Ellie's face in every shadow, every reflection. I tried to piece things together, but I didn't know what she wanted. Guilt had kept me quiet, afraid to ask her for forgiveness, afraid to look too closely at what she might be asking of me. But I couldn't avoid her anymore. One night, feeling desperate and trapped, I found an old Ouija board in the attic, something we'd once played with together as kids, never taking it seriously. I sat down beside the pool, lit a candle, and began. "Ellie," I whispered into the stillness. "Are you here?" The planchette moved slowly, almost reluctantly, to yes. My throat tightened, but I pressed on, heart pounding. "Ellie, what do you need?" I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. I waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity before the planchette started moving again, spelling a word I could hardly bear to read. Switch. An icy dread settled over me. Switch? With her? My mind filled with horrible images, of drowning, of reaching for her hand, of the dark water pulling her under while I surfaced. Was she asking to trade places, to live again, while I took her place in that dark, cold void? I stumbled away from the board, trying to shake off the chill that clung to my skin. That night, I dreamed of drowning, of Ellie's face above me watching as I sank. Her eyes empty and distant, like she was already halfway to forgetting who I was. I woke gasping, a heavy dread in my chest. But when I looked in the mirror, Ellie's face stared back, her expression triumphant, almost satisfied. From that day forward, my own reflection felt strange. It followed me like a shadow, my movements just a fraction too slow, my own eyes holding a hint of Ellie's gaze. I felt like something was terribly wrong, but I was too terrified to acknowledge it, to see what might truly be happening. Late one night, as I crept through the hallway, I spotted her in the reflection of the window. It was pitch black outside, the house eerily silent, but her face glowed faintly in the glass, her expression more strained than ever. Her hand reached out from the darkness behind her, pressing against the window as if she were trying to cross over. I stared, transfixed, my heart racing. Then in a hushed, almost inaudible voice she spoke. "Sarah, please, help me." I gasped, stumbling back, nearly tripping over the edge of the hallway rug. The sound was soft, barely above a whisper, but it was unmistakable. Her voice. My hands shook as I reached out, touching the cold glass where her hand had been, only to feel the smooth, empty surface. "Don't leave me here. Don't leave me alone." I stumbled backward, barely able to breathe, but my eyes stayed locked on hers. She began to fade, her form becoming a blur, her face stretching and distorting as if she were being pulled away. "Please," her voice was almost a sob now, barely a whisper. "Sarah, I need you." The next morning, I woke up on the bathroom floor, weak and disoriented. I didn't remember collapsing, but my head throbbed and my skin felt clammy and cold. I staggered to my feet, leaning on the sink, trying to shake off the memories of last night. But when I looked in the mirror, Ellie was gone. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and exhausted. Days passed, and I almost convinced myself it had all been in my mind. The appearances, the whispers, the plea to switch. Maybe it was just grief twisting my mind, taking Ellie's death and turning it into something darker, something terrifying. But then, I noticed the little things. The house grew colder, especially at night. My own reflection started feeling strange, like it didn't quite match my movements. Once I saw a flicker of Ellie's face in my own, her expression peering back at me with a hint of that same pleading, desperate look. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Ellie was still there, just out of sight, waiting. The word switch haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ellie was trying to tell me something far darker than I could understand. Her appearances became more vivid, more real, like she was breaking through the barrier between us, claiming a piece of my world each time. I began to feel her everywhere. A coldness in the air, a faint whisper behind me, even a shadow moving in mirrors that vanished when I turned around. One night, I woke to the sound of water dripping. I froze, my heart racing as I realized it was coming from the hallway near the pool. The memory of that last day flooded back. The icy water, her terrified eyes, the moment we lost each other in the depths. I forced myself to get up, feeling drawn to the pool as if something invisible were pulling me along. When I reached the edge, I looked down and my blood ran cold. Ellie's face stared up at me from beneath the water, her expression hollow, her hair floating like dark ribbons around her face. Her lips moved, forming a single word: switch. My reflection was gone, replaced by hers, pleading and desperate, eyes locked on mine. I stumbled back, too terrified to look again. I barely slept that night, haunted by Ellie's face and the silent call to switch places with her. to take her place in the depths where she'd been trapped since that day. Then one night I felt a shift as I lay in bed. It was as if my body were being pulled into a deep, heavy sleep, but my mind stayed awake. Aware. I tried to move, but it was like I was paralyzed, bound by some invisible force. I glanced around the room, my vision blurring, and that's when I saw her, standing beside the bed, looking down at me with a serene, almost satisfied smile. "Ellie," I whispered, my voice barely escaping my lips, as if something heavy were pressing down on me. I tried to reach for her, but my arm wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed, watching her stand beside my bed, her face calm, almost peaceful. She looked down at me with eyes that seemed filled with relief, as if she'd finally found what she was looking for. That's when I noticed the strange stillness of my own body lying on the bed. It didn't respond to my attempts to move. Suddenly, I was the one looking down at myself from the outside, trapped in some invisible prison, watching helplessly as Ellie took over my body. Her body now, as I watched. Frozen. Paralyzed. I was the one held back, a spectator in my own room, while Ellie now stood there, breathing, solid, alive. A sickening realization washed over me. Ellie hadn't come back just to haunt me. She'd come back to replace me. The thought clawed at my mind, filling me with horror as I understood. She wanted my life, my place. I tried to scream, to fight, to plead, but my body remained still, my mouth unresponsive. My voice was silent, locked away in some dark corner. A strange, icy coldness crept over me, as if I were sinking into a vast, bottomless void, pulled further and further away from the world I'd known. Desperate, I glanced to my body from inside the mirror across the room, where I was now trapped, praying this was all a nightmare I'd soon wake from. But the reflection looking back at me wasn't mine. It was Ellie's face staring through the glass, her expression calm, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. She raised a hand and touched the mirror as if sealing some silent pact. Ellie was the one people would see, the one who would live. The truth of it settled over me, cold and final. She'd taken my place, claimed my life as her own. I was slipping away, fading into some dark, empty place beyond reach. My presence thinned, becoming nothing more than a faint shadow, a murmur lost in the cold, silent glass. I felt myself weakening, my thoughts blurring, as if I were being swallowed by the mirror itself, reduced to a whisper with no one to hear. Ellie stood before the mirror, gazing back at me, her eyes, now my own, reflecting satisfaction, almost a gentle, quiet pity. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of something darker in her expression, a knowing look, as if she hadn't forgotten how I'd let her hand slip in the water that day. She lifted a hand to the glass, her fingers brushing the surface where I lingered, like she was sealing my fate with a silent farewell. Her lips curved into a soft, final smile, the kind we used to give each other when sharing secrets late at night. But this time it wasn't a smile of comfort. It was a goodbye. I tried to scream one last time, summoning every ounce of strength left within me. I wanted to shout, to claw my way back into the life I'd once known, but no sound escaped. My voice was gone, as hollow as the ghost I'd become. I was invisible now, helplessly trapped, watching as Ellie, wearing my face, my body, my life, turned away from the mirror. She glanced around the room, adjusting to the world that was now hers, breathing it in as if she had been waiting forever. I wanted to reach out, to beg her to stop, but my own reflection looked right through me as if I'd never existed at all. She walked toward the door, moving with a newfound freedom, and I could feel her joy, her relief. My thoughts grew dim, edges softening as I became nothing more than a shadow on the other side of the glass. I felt myself sink further, slipping away with each step she took, until I was only a faint memory, lost in the emptiness of the mirror. And as she closed the door behind her, the last thread holding me to my life broke. I was left alone in the darkness, a silent, voiceless ghost trapped forever in the cold, indifferent glass. No one would see me. No one would remember me. Ellie would live my life as if I had never been, and I would remain invisible and forgotten, just a haunted memory hidden in the reflections.